Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to resume the conversation.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Adam Powell, I was just going to reconvene people. I'm an actor, so I'm skilled in projection. So here you go.
And now you know the real reason that Harry's here.
That's right.
We've heard some success stories and some really interesting information from two markets, from San Diego, before that Nashville, and some comparable stories, both national and local. Now we want to focus on what I think is one of the most interesting stories in public broadcasting, and that's the success here in the Los Angeles market in both radio and television. I think that each one of the managers around the table has a success story to tell. I'm standing behind Brenda Barnes. She has, in a classical music format, which some people think is dead or dying, has built up an audience of, I know you're chewing, but the audience again is 800,000. We have KPCC, which I don't want to say came out of nowhere, but built from a very, very small audience up to, what's your audience?
About 700,000.
700,000. So we have two stations, and of course Ruth at KCRW thought this would all come out of her audience, but it didn't, because they're doing very well also. So we have two stations that have built public radio listening here, and we'll get to television in just a moment, but as a radio and TV guy, I can't resist starting with radio. So Bill, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is that you think has been the key to the success of KPCC, and it was interesting to hear you talk about the 5-hour block in midday. That is critical.
Yeah. When I came to KPCC a little bit more than a decade ago, there was, I think, considerable skepticism about whether there was really an audience for local news on the scale that we were contemplating producing. And fortunately, the relationship with American Public Media, and also, I think, critically with our board of trustees, where they were willing to make 6- and 7-figure donations to invest in local news coverage, allowed us to secure a foothold that complemented what National Public Radio was doing in their news magazine programming during drive time. So, the cornerstones for us have been, first and foremost, a depth of coverage. And when we talk about depth, particularly in that regional area, this is not depth that is achieved in one individual story, but in telling multiple stories over time. And we really believe, and I'll come back to this in just a little bit, that if you can have the most interesting 5 minutes, followed by the most interesting 5 minutes, followed by the most interesting 5 minutes on the broadcast spectrum in Los Angeles, that you have a fighting chance of not only maintaining your audience, but growing it. The second thing that we've tried to focus on is a sense of place. And you've heard that already on the public television side, but I think it's fair to say that Los Angeles is probably one of the 10 most important cities on the globe. I don't know if it cracks the top 5, but it certainly is in the top 10 in terms of its impact on popular culture, film, arts, those sorts of things, and it's increasingly becoming a more of a hub for distribution and those sorts of things. And finally, it is America's port of entry. What New York was to the country 100 years ago, Los Angeles is now in terms of immigration, net immigration coming in. So what we've tried to do is build on this sense of place to have distinctive and authentic voices and perspectives. People who are and are reflectively, quintessentially Los Angeles. That takes time. and you're going to have mistakes, and you're going to have to, sometimes you hire folks, they don't work out, they move on. So it hasn't been an uninterrupted climb, but it's been something that we've really been working on and continue to do that. The next thing that we really look at is, and try to hold ourselves accountable to, is a compelling user experience. If you listen to KPCC, it does not sound like any other public radio station in the country. We chop the hell out of Morning Edition and All Things Considered. We, there are a lot of stories that are produced nationally that don't end up locally because we've determined that they don't fit in terms of that quality of user experience. But the trademarks that we always want to have are that we're engaging, that we're lively, that we're accessible and curious. And also, Los Angeles has, I think, an undeserved reputation as being somewhat of a intellectual lightweight. But our approach is that we want to take on serious subjects, but we never want to take ourselves too seriously. For those of you who are coming from the East Coast, I would remind you of Ronald Reagan's great line. It may be the greatest line in American politics, which is that if the Pilgrims had landed in California, Plymouth Rock would still be undiscovered. We try to remind ourselves of that every day. And as we're moving forward, you heard Suzanne, you're talking about multiple platforms. I think this is really the key to our success in the future. Real-time broadcast isn't going away, and real-time broadcast will always have value. In San Diego, when you guys had the fires, real-time broadcast was absolutely critical. But then you also have disaggregatable digital content, whether that's a segment that's in Morning Edition or All Things Considered or on your local call-in show. It might be digital, it might be video, it might be data. But mastering that platform is absolutely critical. Social media, and then live events. And this is, as I said, audio, video, and text. So, Vinny, to your point earlier, video is absolutely key to what we're hoping to accomplish coming forward. And then I heard a number of people talking about the decline of newspapers in specific markets. I don't think anybody has seen a more precipitous decline for a newspaper than the LA Times, going from more than 1,200 editorial assets to now around 500.
And you just hired the former editor.
And we just hired the former editor, not because he was one of the people who was slashing, but because he was one of the ones who was absolutely frustrated with the inability of legacy media to really come to grips with the changes that digital media are manifesting on our shared enterprises. And so that's been a really important focus. But the other thing that local newspapers used to do was bring people together. And when I was growing up in Los Angeles in the 70s, the LA Times editorial page, whether you agreed with it or not, was something that just about every informed Angelino was reading and talking about. And there are very few civic institutions in any community that are doing that. And this is, with our call-in shows, with our Facebook and other social media, we see that being a critical role for us to play, not only in terms of bringing people together, but also really mastering user-generated content. And whether those are call-ins from listeners or interaction on our websites or social media sites, it's axiomatic for us that the audience knows more than anything, or than any of our editors do about any specific topic. That really the knowledge is in the audience, and if we can both engage them in that and get them to share that knowledge, then we're going to be ahead of the game.
Dan Gilmore had a great line when he was at the Fantasy Directory News. My readers know more than I do.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then last but not least, as we've grown our audience, one of the key things is we don't want to lose any existing audience member. But if you look at the history of public media generally and public radio specifically, that audience has been whiter, better educated, more liberal, more secular than the communities as a whole. And if you look at, there's a concentric circle just beyond that core audience of public media that is nearly as well educated, in many senses more affluent, but less secular, more religious, and also tend to be more Latino, more African American, more Asian American, but they don't hear their own voices. And given that Los Angeles is a majority-minority community, I actually don't like that term, but the largest demographic group is the Latino American group. If we're going to be successful in attracting that first concentric audience, we're going to be having to change those hosts, the reporters, the editorial staff, etc., so that, again, if we're going to be authentic to Los Angeles, that we're reflecting those voices, those people in those communities are hearing that, and we hold up the, an accurate mirror to an imperfect paradise.
There's some live chat that's going on parallel to this on the webcast chat window. It's great to I want to first ask you to expand on that last point. Where do you think KPCC and other public broadcasters should be, what direction should they be taking to tap that next concentric circle?
Well, actually, I will tell you, we're working on a project that CPB has funded and very generously so, where we're looking at specifically identifying some Latino broadcast talent. And a lot of times, you talk about culture, it's also about your own social networks, right? And as part of this process, we came across a group called Talent Dynamics out of Dallas, which has one of the most unbelievable talent databases of Latino and non-Anglo broadcast talent anywhere. Now, I'd never come across these people, but we went from having about, I'm going to say, a dozen people who had applied who were sort of in our larger social network to 93, right? So, just that relationship alone has been tremendously valuable. So, but there's also an old adage that news is what the editor sees on his or her way into work, right? And news looks a lot different if you're coming to work from, say, Boyle Heights than you are if you're coming in from Mandeville Canyon. So, I'll use one analogy. About a year ago, there was a threatened grocery strike, and one of our reporters who lives in a largely Latino neighborhood was like, well, no one cares about that potential issue where I live. And as it turns out, there's a huge number of immigrant-owned grocery stores, and in fact, this has actually been confirmed with subsequent research that there aren't really the food ghettos that people thought there were. There may be an Albertsons, a lack of an Albertsons or a major grocery chain, but there are dozens of other ones, and this trend is actually being replicated nationally. So it's that kind of diversification of newsrooms, of editorial staffs, that I think is going to be critical again for us to evolve into or to improve our service as an authentically representative news gathering institution and an authentic place where people from disparate communities can come together and discuss and debate.
I want to get to the webcast questions and go to Al next, but you've raised a really interesting point. Comments around the table on this? Look right, you have your hand up.
That's very easy.
I just wonder if you could give an example of user-generated content and what you've been able to do with it that's been successful.
Probably the most successful one was there was a small prison riot in Chino, and we just happened to have a couple of listeners who either had relatives or sons of friends who were involved in or had observed this riot, And all of a sudden we got this treasure trove of letters that were being sent, and guys making videos with their cell phones, that they're not supposed to have in the joint anyway. But all this stuff begins to get out, and the story was at considerable odds with what the Department of Corrections was reporting. And once we began to move on that story, the state auditor general came down to conduct their own investigation. So that's the kind of thing. We've done other ones, but that was probably the most dramatic example of the user-generated content.
David, you want to?
I guess just a question more philosophical, but you talked about having your core and then the concentric circles, and I can certainly see myself there. And you talked about how can we grow our service to tap the next ring.
Yeah.
I guess the question, do you ask yourselves, if I'm in that ring, how do I tap into your institution? Or how do I?
Oh, absolutely.
So how do you figure that out, I wonder?
So there's a huge outreach function that you have to do, because people have a plethora of media choices, right? So one of the outreach efforts that we did was, looking at first and second generation immigrant entrepreneurs. We've done this reporting. Hey, this is an interesting class. It doesn't get reported on much by the LA Business Journal or the LA Times or all these other local business coverage who are looking at the Capital Group and the
well covered, right?
Yeah, and they're looking at the media industry, right? So we had a seminar of 4 or 5 immigrant family businesses that had taken off in essence, and there were maybe 140, 150 people who attended this thing, and I mean it was a love fest. And the just from those, we've actually done a couple follow-ups, but from that, we have been making all of these connections with immigrant entrepreneurs, across the ethnic spectrum. And what's interesting about that, and this comes to a governance and fundraising perspective, is that these folks aren't on USC's hit list to help them raise $6 billion in their capital, or in their capital campaign. They're not on boards of trustees, and they're not generally well known within the community, and yet they have tremendous levels of wealth. They're tremendously well connected within their own communities, and so that outreach function works both at sort of what I would call an executive level, and also deeper if you put the resources into it.
That's a really big point. I've been away from LA now for almost 2 years, and in Washington, you would never know that one of the largest Korean communities in the world is in Northern Virginia if you read the Washington Post.
Yeah.
It's simply never covered.
Right.
The webcast, the parallel chat that was going on was, gee, this is all very interesting, but is this something that only applies to the top 10 markets? Is this something that can be done in market number 50 or 75?
Look, what is true in LA today will be true in Nashville in 15 years or so. America is what is, I think nearly a third of all Americans between the ages of 16 and 34 are Latino. And that is our future. And it's becoming a more multi-ethnic and a more intermarried community. And again, if you're not reaching out, if you're not making those connections, they will find their own media, and they will support those.
Sure.
I'd like that. It's not the future; it's the present.
No,
And
I'm 54, so
no, I understand. I'm older than you are. It's the present, and with all due respect, if I had a nickel for every time I heard this conversation about we need to be diverse and we need to reflect our community, I wouldn't be sitting here. There are a lot of smart people sitting at this table. There is no secret to including the community. And it's not about hiring one reporter. It's about reflecting in your senior management and your boards the community. People not only report on what they see when they drive to work, they hire people who look like them. And that's just true. So there's no secret to this. The reality is that the community is diverse. Those people who vote with their feet and they vote with their dollars. And you know, quite honestly, we're building a vehicle to cater to and support that community. So I'm going to race you to them. Because I believe that there's real value there. That point of view is legitimate, and I don't see it expressed in a lot of other venues, quite honestly. But there's no secret to this.
Yeah. Well, there's some stuff in the Nashville thing. Nashville reports that it's got the largest Kurdish community in the United States.
That's right.
And she does a series called Next Door Neighbors. And this is a local show that they repeated and repeated and repeated. But it's just, after you've engaged them, then it's always my question. Because engagement's a big hot topic and so forth. But in most instances, when I talk to people about you're engaging in an ethnic community and so forth, it turns out it's education. Okay? Nothing wrong with education. But in the main, what you're talking about is when you put them on your board and you do a variety of other things, it's engagement, and then you have something to do with it and them. Rather than I do it once, you know? And you know, I'll do a Kurdish show 17 years and 2 months.
Your point is well taken, as is yours, George. You know, I'm not suggesting that we are, you know, that we found the secret sauce, but you know, in a newsroom of around 100 people now, you know, the largest percentage of our reporters are Latino. Our executive leadership team is majority non-white and a supermajority of first-generation immigrants. But your point about having, you know, one, being the present and also having huge value is absolutely spot on.
I can't resist repeating a phrase you just said. You have a newsroom of about 100 people.
Yeah, we're now the, well, actually, when we finish our next round of hiring, we'll be the second largest newsroom in LA. And then there's a huge disparity between us and the New York Times, I mean, the LA Times. They still have 500 editorial. But once we get to that point, we will be equal to the number of reporters and editors they have assigned to cover California. So,
Probably more focus.
The engagement that you're talking about is the additional reporter. It's also the trustee members, but it is also, at a very minimum, taking, at least in television, the idle multicast digital channels that we have and making them part of this engagement. We in San Francisco have activated a 24/7 Chinese language channel. Love to make it PBS in Chinese, if nothing else, adding subtitles and voiceovers, or if it were here in Southern California, PBS in Vietnamese. But it's all of these things because, as you say, this is the present, and the present will get even more concentrated with the kind of diversity that we already have. So, well,
Remind me to put you in touch with the head of Taiwan Public Television, who can't. They say they can't get anybody to answer their phone calls here. Al.
Yes, sir.
I know you wanted to speak for a little bit, and I know you have handouts everybody has.
I'm going to step up there if it's okay.
Absolutely.
I think it's, I'm going to go over this handout for the benefit of those of you who are watching this on the webinar.
Can I ask you just to move to the side of the screen? I think it's going to distract you.
Side.
You can your side, left and right.
Okay.
So we can get a camera shot of you. Nice.
All right, thank you. The story of KCET and its decision to become a independent public television station is really the story of a startup company that was is being built on a company with a 47-year history. What I'm going to try to do is to give you a quick snapshot of what's happened in the past 16 months and answer any questions. When we made our announcement that we were leaving October 8th of 2010, we had about 3 months to get a schedule together and to put it on the air. And so in our first year, we had a 3-year plan that we carved out that was going to take us to where we needed to be. In the first year, obviously, we had to resolve the issue of whether we were going to remain a part of PBS. Once that was done, we had to acquire a schedule that, in the short run, we wanted to appeal to our traditional audience, and then as we move forward, we would be building an audience that would reach the new audiences that we need. We had to rebrand the station. We knew there was going to be an inevitable reduction in revenue, so we built that into our business plan. We were very fortunate that 3 foundations stepped up and gave us working capital grants in the first year that's obviously very helpful. And then we needed to sell the major asset that was owned by the corporation, which was our studio lot. And we were very fortunate that the buyer of that lot was not only gave us a nice price, but they also bought all of our equipment, which allowed us to build a new place that was completely state-of-the-art multimedia operation with we have a virtual studio, we have another studio. We're using all open architecture, and it's really a nice contemporary look. As a matter of fact, we built it out on budget, on time, and we had a ribbon cutting ceremony yesterday. And this is the building. It is on, for those of you who know the Los Angeles area, it's in Burbank. It is right across the street from the NBC lot and on Alameda Street. So it's really quite nice. The second and third year of the plan, though, are really the important part. We needed to roll out a programming strategy that would define us in the new era. I mean, we 70% of our shelf space had been carrying PBS programming, and so therefore we had to really put some tent poles in the ground that were going to define where we were going in the future. And we needed, most of all, to differentiate ourselves from the other 3 public television stations in Southern California, which were PBS affiliates, and the obvious question, well, what is KCET? So we had to start answering that question. And of course, as we move into we're in the second year now, and as we move from the second to the third year, we're changing the tires, going 90, as I say. We are reconstituting the funding model that KCET will need to move forward. So let me go over a couple of highlights. The first chart in this presentation just indicates that even with the largely acquired schedule that didn't really include any of the new programs that we were developing, or not many of them, there's some evidence of differentiation in the sense that public television on the same 4 stations has increased 18%, comparing the first quarter of 2012 with KCET as an independent compared to 2010 with KCET as a PBS station. The primetime audience of KCET has grown significantly in the past year. When you take a look at the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter, our audience has increased 62% in the first quarter of this year versus first quarter of last year. And most importantly, we've virtually recovered all of the audience that we lost as a PBS station. We have essentially the same primetime audience as we had in the first quarter of 2010 when we were a PBS station. The next chart gives you the numbers for the whole day. We've grown over the past year 14%, but the reason that's a lesser percent than the primetime number is because we have, as you can see, we've lost 81% of our daytime audience because we're not carrying the PBS Kids lineup. And so, but still, I mean, another way of looking at it is you reverse it and you say, well, you lost 81% on the Kids lineup, and yet you're up 14% in your total day. So that's a way to spin it if you want to look at it positively. while we don't think of ourselves as competitive to KOCE in any way, it is a point of reference in terms of what, how we are doing. And if you take a look at the average quarter-hour Nielsen numbers, comparing KCET versus KOCE in the first quarter of 2012, you see that the difference is 3,000 viewers per average quarter hour. KOCE is beating KCET 37,000 to 34,000, and that's in a market as large as LA, that's kind of a virtual dead heat. And the same thing is true on the whole day. A little bit bigger margin for KOCE, but it's still 3,000 viewers. So that's not bad in the first year that we would essentially lose the entire PBS lineup and achieve in a year virtual parity with the primary PBS station. So the question, flipping the chart, is how have we differentiated ourselves and what are we doing? As Bill mentioned and others have mentioned, LA is the most diverse community in the United States of America. And so one of the things that we wanted to plant a stake in the ground, we said, international news really works here. I mean, everybody wants international news, and what we wanted to do is to make a mark in that. So we were already the national syndicator of BBC World News, and we had BBC World News, but we became the first television station in the United States to carry Al Jazeera English. We wanted to balance that a little bit. We were very comfortable with their editorial policy. We had watched it on Megahertz Worldview, which is one of our digital channels, and we moved it in, but we also put IBA news from Israel just in case. And frankly, we've learned that in many cases, IBA is a whole lot tougher on Israel than Al Jazeera in some respects. And of course, we put NHK Newsline. So that when Arab Spring hit, we had Al Jazeera as well as BBC World News. When the tsunami and earthquake occurred in Japan, we had NHK, and we took long chunks of our broadcast day just to run their feeds, and we had special arrangements. And of course, we worked with BBC to promote BBC World News America, which we think is an important part of the point. A second differentiation, which complements the international news piece, I mentioned earlier, is our local news and information. Our SoCal Connected program, I would love to have it as a 5-day-a-week program, but right now it is a once-a-week program. But we've uncovered 4 investigations in this last year, and it is a major investigative force in this community, and I won't go over which ones they are, but if anybody cares, I'll tell them. We also have one of the most compelling personalities in Southern California, a fellow named Huell Hauser, that for over 25 years has really been acquainting people with the places and the people of Southern California and the state of California. We have him. And then we launched a new show this year that called Your Turn to Care, which we think deals frontally with the single biggest cost issue on the healthcare system in this country, and that's elder care. What happens in the last year or two of a person's life. We did a show that's called Your Turn to Care. It's an internet-first show in the sense that we produced these things, put them on the web, created a website, and a television to follow, if you know what I mean. We've used our SoCal Connected to put these segments on, and now we are nationally distributing to PBS stations via APT 4 specials that star a woman named Holly Robinson Peete, who's a well-known actress in Southern California, and for those of you who are football fans, the wife of Rodney Peete, former NFL football player. Another thing that we do to differentiate ourselves is that we have decided that we are going to be the station that really engages and demonstrates the local arts, culture, and performance in our community. So we created a program that we run on Thursday night. It's a weekly show. It's called Open Call. And essentially, it features the talent, if you will, from the major educational institutions and performance institutions in our community. And we are giving them primetime television every week. So the Colburn School, which is the Juilliard for Southern California, has been on Camerata Pacifica, which I don't even love chamber music, and I love them, and because they are so charismatic and dynamic. The Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra, they have a series right now where they have 30 pianos that they've planted all over Southern California. It's called Play Me, I'm Yours, and we are taping those pianos, and we're going to put them in a later show. We're partnering with the Los Angeles Arts Commission. We did 4 shows live at the Ford Theater with a Korean show, a Mexican show, an African-American show, and a world jazz show. USC was one of our partners. We've done 2 shows. The first one is with Cinematic Arts, where we've shown the finalists of their own internal competition called First Look. The Thornton Classical Orchestra being conducted by James Conlon. That is upcoming. We're working with CalArts on the history of animation, utilizing their facilities. Kenny Burrell is a well-known jazz guitarist. UCLA partnered with us, and we put on a show that honored Kenny from UCLA on his 80th birthday, and we're doing a second show with them. This is not hard to do for us, but believe me, with the people have said, how do you make that happen? I said, well, think of us as Costco after they took the Kirkland products off the shelf. You know, there's a lot of shelf space, and we're really a good store. So people are coming to us, and they have a lot of ideas, and now we're becoming the station that says yes. We're also putting on a lot of independent documentaries. We're doing a documentary with Dudamel. We're doing one with Martin Lauritsen. A show came to us where 100 cantors, led by cantor Nathan Lamb, who's a Southern California cantor, 100 cantors went to Poland and were singing cantorial music, which, by the way, is the same as opera. And it was a remarkable show. It aired only in theaters for 1 week, and somebody came to us, would you guys be interested in this? Of course we're interested. And it aired in prime time in Open Call. Open Call is the name of the series. It is hosted every week by Susana Guzman, who is the mezzo-soprano of the LA Opera. She's from East LA, and so what she does is she brings the leadership of these organizations in, talks to them. What are we going to see? It's really quite nice, and we're very excited about it. We also, what differentiates us is that we were able to make a deal with a French entrepreneur and a company known as Itronics, in which Itronics would fund productions that KCET will produce that appeal to the Southern California community, and Itronics would fund it in return for which they have the rights to distribute that content nationally and internationally. And some of it will be available for public television stations through KCET and of course through international. This partnership is based on the theory that what happens in Southern California is exportable elsewhere in the world. And that's essentially the business connection that we have. So it's a true partnership, and we're looking forward to it. The first show has already hit the air. It is on Saturday nights at 9 o'clock. It is called Classic Cool Theater. It's classic public domain movies which Itronics owns the masters of, and we link it with a cartoon, a movie tone news that's thematically linked to the subject of the old film, and the old music soundies. So we're replicating essentially the movie-going experience that many of us grew up with. And the next thing I wanted to say is, in the future, look for LA Tonight with Roy Firestone. We have done 9 episodes of this already. We put it on as a limited series of music maker. Roy Firestone for 22 years was the interviewer for ESPN when they would do these up close and personal. But he's not a sports guy. He's a great interviewer, and we've had him on. We've done specials on David Foster with Chris Bodie, Burt Bacharach, Diane Warren, Steve Tyrell, Debbie Allen, and Andre Agassi. We're doing one coming up with Joachim Splichal, whose offices are in this building, the chef for Patina, and many other facilities. So Roy, we're looking at launching that as a daily series at 10 o'clock in Southern California. LA, as everybody who lives here knows, is an early to bed market. So all the shows that are on, whether they are Tavis Smiley or whether they're Charlie Rose or even the ones on commercial television, tend to under-index in LA because the audience goes to bed a little bit later. We think a 10 o'clock interview show with the people of Southern California for Southern California will really work. And then we have other things. We're working with Ian Cross, the executive producer of Globe Trekker, where we merge his library. He has a tremendous library of material that he has never shown on television in the United States, and we're going to marry this international footage with footage of the indigenous populations in Southern California of the same nationality, so that we, we mix the old country, the new country, and he's very excited about that, and so are we. I'll mention the only other one I'll mention here. We're doing a show with Jean-Michel Cousteau. Many of you remember his shows from PBS. What makes this difference is that this show will be done. It'll be about the environment. It'll be about kids. It'll be done in Catalina Island and at KCET in the studio. So that's where we're going. It'll be very local. And just finally, let me just say that we in all of these, we're always standing ready to serve public television stations in the country. PBS affiliates, it doesn't really make any difference. We are the distributor for BBC World News. We have been now since 2009, and we have a network that we've built up that includes 97% distribution for BBC World News. The contract was up for renewal, and the question was, how would you do? That you're not PBS. We got a 3-year renewal, and so we will have it until June of 2015, and we're talking to them about new programs. Finally, we have made a major investment in new media, and I will just tell you that the creation of new content on new media at KCET has resulted in really significant increases. For example, we've had increases the last 2 years of 101% and 58% in unique visits. In visits that are driven by social media, we've gone up, since 2010, we've gone up 1,500%. And we've increased by 100% the video streams that we're taking down from KCET. And according to Quantcast, which is one of the diagnostics that I guess is publicly available, KCET now is by far the largest public television site in Los Angeles for social media. We've made this investment. There's no returning. We unify our content, and so we're going to do our best to do that. So that's basically it. And one piece of good news, I haven't talked about the funding model because we certainly have to continue to find new ways to fund this type of station. But interestingly enough, in the latest round of direct mail that we did this last month, we had almost 900 donors that had been lapsed from 2000 for the last between 2 and 8 years. They had been lapsed for between 2 and 8 years, and they came back. And that's it. That in 1 month, that's not too bad.
How many was that?
850, exactly. So it's a little story, but on the other hand, we look for trends, obviously. So thank you.
We'll get to KOCE and PBS SoCal in a minute because, as you say, you both have roughly comparable audiences now. Now, to my distant, looking at this from 2,000 miles away, if you both have this comparable audience, which is what you used to have before, it sounds like there's more viewing or more viewers or both.
Well, I said in the first chart, public television has gone up 18%.
Are those new viewers, or are those people, the same viewers, that are viewing more? Do we know?
I can't tell you that.
To give you some idea of what we're talking about, 10 years ago, Al's station had a 54Q.
Had a what?
54Q. And now it's got 11. All right?
How many years ago?
10 years ago. 2002 to 2000. Now, everybody's Q is now, so the sampling is now. The other thing in his defense is this market for public television underperforms dramatically. To give you some idea, all of prime time here, all of prime time for those two stations generates 3,000 gross rating points a year. Okay? KPBS is at about 40,000, and about the same number for Nashville. So there's a lot going on in this market, but it's aggregating that audience. It's been
how do you explain that difference, David?
I don't know, but Al, I mean,
well, you have four PBS stations as opposed to one in San Diego. I mean, San Diego's model is great. I mean, it's nearly perfect. It's a co-licensee with one station.
And almost no competition here.
Yeah, I mean,
from non-cops.
I don't think it's, look, I think public television is better served in Southern California now with KCET being an independent station that can do the things that, I mean, frankly, we're happy. I mean, we were very pleased that KOCE stepped up quickly to be the primary station because a lot of our viewers who were disenfranchised needed to know where to go. And we were, you know, we tried to be as helpful as we could be under those circumstances. It took a little of the heat off us. Yes.
What? So I have two questions. One is, while then you've got sort of replaced the numbers of people, given the programming, I'm assuming the kinds of people are really different, and I'd love to just hear more about that if you know about that. And the other thing is, in terms of your business model, what it sounds like you've done is lowered your operating costs tremendously. Sorry to see you leave the neighborhood I live in, but you know, and I'd love to hear a little bit about that, and how that's working as a business.
Well, for starters, moving into this new facility, we estimate, I mean, you know, we just started 2 weeks ago, but we estimate the annual operating savings to be $1,650,000. Which is pretty good. It's a combination of equipment and a new union agreement. A lot of things have happened. I really don't have the new media numbers. The growth that we've experienced in digital media, I think, gives me some hope that we are somewhat reconstituting the audience. You know, bringing some new people into public television. But I don't have the kind of hard evidence that you know, you'd be looking for it at that point. I think we would need some special studies to get that done. But you know, like I said, I think it's kind of settled out rather nicely in the sense that I think, if I'm not mistaken, Ed could correct me on it, but I believe that you know, KOCE is now at the level, certainly in prime time, that where KCET had been. You know, and so that's a good thing too. I mean, because I don't think it's clear that PBS hasn't lost much either. I mean, maybe one, you know, maybe the equivalent of one whatever KOCE had before, that they haven't, you know, but they're at the level of audience where we were. Yes, David.
If you could snap your fingers and change one thing at KCET, what would it be?
One thing?
Yeah.
Other than the general manager? Well, I guess well, I think if I could change one thing, I mean, it's assuming that something is wrong. I think what's been unfortunate. I think we're a very watched public television station. I was going to say we're the most watched public television station in the United States, not by the viewers, but by other stations. You know, everybody said, "What are you guys doing?" You know, I think if I could change one thing, I think I would try to change the perception in the powers that be that we're really trying to build public television. We're not tearing anything down. We're trying to come up with another way that public television can engage its community. I mean, look, I don't think, my own personal opinion, and I don't think when the Public Television Act or Public Broadcasting Act of 1967 was signed into law, I don't really think that that LBJ's thinking is that what would happen 40 plus years from that point is that 3 East Coast television stations would be dominating the national agenda. That, in other words, that all that public television do, what Stephanie does so well, and others, is to fund a national program organization. Don't get me wrong, the programs are fantastic. They've always been great. But I think there's something more than that has to be done. And maybe KCET's place in the universe is, because we have all this shelf space and we're using our resources a different way, maybe we will be able to show what kinds of success can be achieved when you really do engage your local community.
Thank you.
David?
Yeah.
But also I want to hear what you're going to say. But I think I have to speak up a little. It's interesting to me that what stations and markets like LA are getting around to is something that many have tried before, but typically it's this quote-unquote secondary stations that have historically tried to say, look, let's have a differentiated program stream. And most of them don't. But I was part of the launch of WYBE in Philadelphia, which was almost entirely non-duplicative. And a lot of the same strategies, international, I think we were the first to bring in BBC, but we had tremendous flexibility, no resources. And I think it's fascinating that what then, and I think for your station and for Howard Station and others, it's been a perennial struggle, partly because you don't have the program stream. I'm fascinated by and I'm encouraged by, Mark, the notion that public television, so to speak, could in fact bring diversified program services, which also would allow for a much broader range of engagement and content. So it's more of a comment.
We knew.
I hope that, I mean, we're going to have to learn. It's not just KCET drops PBS.
No, it really, I mean, that really isn't, I don't think that's the story.
There's a whole new, and I think
I wish the LA Times would pick it up, but I don't think that, no, I think,
but I should probably talk to you.
I think being in LA helps if you're going to do it the first one, because LA, everybody's a producer. Everybody has content. I mean, we couldn't have enough hours in the day to take care of the number of institutions and people. And then you add on the diversity component here, where, as you said, George, everybody needs to be seen on television. Say, this is a station that welcomes, who we are. And I mean, so it's not an accident that Holly Robinson Peete is our host of Your Turn to Care, or that Susanna Guzman. That's a conscious decision.
Can I just ask our colleague from the Bay Area to weigh in on this? Or?
Well, my comments exactly what I was going to suggest, but also not only just a comment, a question is, given us being a secondary station in a
We're not using that word anymore, but
yeah, okay.
So to speak.
Does this kind of distinctiveness export itself to all many secondary markets, Chicago, Washington?
I don't think that what we're doing here necessarily is the actual game plan that we have exports to every place. I think it would to San Francisco. I think it would to Chicago. I think it would to places that have, the same kind of population demographics, creative, people. But I don't think that's really what's significant. I think any general manager in any city, even if the game plan is not leaving PBS, if it has nothing to do with PBS, you can still, I would love to see that trend reverse where stations are cutting back 20% of their local programming. I mean, there's got to be a way to increase local programs and not leave PBS. I mean, I don't think that, I think that, you can do it, you can do both. But I think every market can find an adaptation of what we're trying to do. It may not be exactly the same thing as we're doing, but certainly an adaptation of it.
We've heard that you can do local and do it well, but pledging may not follow. So your business model...
We hardly pledge. We don't have pledge drives. We will pledge evenings. We're pledging Doc Martin. I mean, Doc Martin, which has been our big hit, interestingly enough, before Downton Abbey went on, in the fourth quarter of 2011, Doc Martin was the highest rated regular series on public television in LA. It beat Masterpiece by 32%. Then it went off the air because it was on hiatus because they were producing a new season. Downton Abbey came in and just did great. And so we don't have head-to-head competition, really. But the fact is that, you can't be worried about the ratings. You just have to do the right job. Do the right job, promote it. We're not getting huge ratings from some of these local things, but we're committed, we're going to stay the course, and we're going to do it. Because we think this is what justifies an independent public television station.
Al, do you guys have a positive operating margin?
Not yet. Not yet.
Just to expand a little bit, you said you're not pledging.
We are pledging. We don't have a pledge drive. We'll pledge an evening. We will pledge an evening. One of the things we've done, for example, we've had a half a dozen examples where we pledge with another nonprofit organization. Now, we don't give them money, but for example, if we were pledging an evening with an organization that ministers to battered women. We showed a documentary about a woman who had been killed by her husband, and we brought in at Interval House the CEO and some of their clients. We talked about what we did, and what we did is a portion, instead of giving away pledge premiums, we gave gifts in kind. We gave taxi vouchers, food, and clothing to for a portion of what was raised to this organization. We've done about half a dozen examples of that. And because we want people to begin to see us as an organization that really is working in partnership with the other nonprofits and trying to help them in any way. There's so much good work that's being done in Southern California, and it's so hard in such a populated market to get the word out. So we're trying to partner, and we think we can advance their cause as well as ours.
Thank you. I hope you can stay around the table as we go to KOCE and continue to talk about Los Angeles, which is just, I said, my favorite market, not because I'm standing here, but because of all these interesting successes that are around the table. So let's go to KOCE/PBS SoCal.
Yes. Jamie's handing out some information here for you to take home. David, maybe you can help because I've got different information about ratings. We're measuring on sweeps. I know Al talked about quarters. I know sweeps are still significant in our industry. But, we're seeing sweeps ratings going up significantly over the past 2 years.
I mean, basically what Downton Abbey did was it congealed the primetime audience and they found it. Right. And you're at his king were better, and you're at his gross rating points were better. Right. The other observation is it's just the performance level of all 4 stations.
Okay, I just wanted that to be said because we're talking about different numbers, and I know different things get printed in the media, and it's a lot of back and forth. First of all, I want to say thank you, Al. The kudos to you for going on a new path, and we want to say thank you for the PBS brand.
You're very welcome.
And if you haven't noticed, we have embraced the PBS brand by changing our name. And I think that's kind of what I remember the conversation we had earlier today about having that anchor store in your mall. We think PBS is the anchor store. We would not want to not have that anchor be built around it. So when the news came a while back that we would be the primary PBS station, I think that the reaction from our customers, from our viewers, was, what? No primary, no Frontline, no NewsHour, no Masterpiece, no what? So we had to think pretty fast and say, we've got to do this. Our history is a roller coaster. It took us from one place to another. A brief background, we started off as the Coast Community College District licensee in 1972. Then Prop 13 hit. I don't know if we're going to have this in Mel Rogers' videos. I'm assuming
I
not.
moved it forward to you.
Very
beginning?
Go ahead,
keep going. No,
okay.
I'm 245.
Oh, good. So I'll give you the background then. So Prop 13 hit. The station that had embraced education by being the nation's largest telecourse air producer became a little bit less prominent. When Mel Rogers came in 1997, the first thing he said was, you owe it to the people of Orange County to be an Orange County local production unit, create local content. In 2004, the first significant move to being more widely seen was with the advent of digital television. We had to be on a higher mountaintop. Everything about broadcasting means if you don't have a good signal, your signal in digital is going to be not so good. It's not just shadows, it's you're gone. So we got a consortium together of other likewise thinking broadcasters, went to Mount Wilson, and then became a presence in the entire market. Right around that same time, our college district had a financial need to sell the station. Long story short, a bidding process went on in which the phrase CPB qualified was not used in the request for bids, and the station got involved as the object of everyone's affection and attention. We were being fought over by Daystar and the Coast District, who did not see the come to terms about what an appropriate sale to the highest bidder was. Long story short, the issues were resolved. We were allowed to become a community licensee, and just when we were free from the university and starting to fundraise on our own to pay back our legal fees that were the result of this dispute, then along came the recession, and any hope that we would be able to really grow at that time got pushed back. Climbing out of the recession, I think you'll see in the handout that you were given some numbers that take us to 2009. But after 2009, we started to inch back, and then the news came that KOCE was being offered the primary PBS station. That was a very wild time. We changed our programming schedule. On the very same day, we moved into new offices. We got a new name. We did it all within a matter of a few months with the help of CPB and a lot of people who just said, they've got to succeed. You've got to do this. So I think that takes you up to right about now.
And Mel couldn't be with us.
Yes.
He recorded this.
Yes.
I'm going to cut it. I cut the. He just gave. I just gave the first part. And when we hit the part where we see the feature, I'm going to jump forward and catch part of the end. Okay.
Fine.
So let's hope that it all works. Is the sound on? No.
It's like radio without the sound, but with the picture.
No sound.
Oh.
Is the sound on there?
No, it looks like you're muted.
Oh, mute.
I think Mel's just playing a joke on me.
There it is.
Yeah. Okay.
We're thrilled that the best thing about ratings for us is that in prime time, our gross rating points are today higher than KCET's gross rating points were when they were the primary station. And we're very pleased that we've had that success. And they're significantly higher. Of course, we have much bigger challenges with whole day audience. KCET was such a household word and such a habit for so many people who would just graze and think of KCET's channel number and think, I'm gonna check on PBS. And those are the people that we're still trying to get. We're still a long way to go to catch up in total whole day viewership to where KCET was, even though our primetime viewership is very, very excellent at this point in time. You know, there are a lot of initiatives, but the main one was the rebranding initiative to help bring people to us. We knew we had to identify broadly with the market, and we're proud to identify with PBS. And when we did the testing and found that PBS SoCal worked, and we knew PBS would be what we would lead with, not SoCal PBS, but PBS SoCal, we knew it was the right thing to do in terms of hits, in terms of online identification, and of course in terms of making people understand who we are now and what we mean relative to their public media use in this market. It's worked very, very well for us, although we have had a few audiences that haven't come around, and we found that the Latino viewing of our children's programs was down. And so with PBS's help, we've done some paid media in those areas, and then we've worked very hard to get earned media throughout the market in trying to let everyone know exactly what's going on here and why it matters to them. And of course, the proof in the pudding has been in the ratings, and that trend line, that ratings trend line, continues unchanged. Obviously, we know that can't happen forever, but we're thrilled that it is continuing up, and we are able to grow and grow and grow in this market and be relevant. And of course, fundraising follows audience. It always does. We're pledging 45% less than we used to, but bringing in 52% more dollars than we used to as KOCE. And we're very proud of that effort. Of course, our direct mail has really taken off, as many people who used to support KCET have switched over to us because of our PBS shows. We think we've done a great job of looking and feeling like a first-rate PBS station in the #2 market in the country. We worked really hard at making the interstitial strong, and with putting together the snipes and the promos and the focus and the things we need to put together to hold audience and to keep them around. And that's all been really important to us. So we're proud of being able to do what we think is a very positive reflection on PBS here in this market. Our base of support, we think, is getting more and more secure all the time because we have the PBS brand now. And as anyone will tell you, and all the research shows, people have favorite radio stations, but they have favorite television programs. They typically don't have favorite television stations. And that's an important thing to remember. It's all about the shows. And with the PBS shows, the local content we're developing to augment those now, we think we're in a very strong position for the future. Of course, the American Graduate Project is really important to us, and we're going to ride that horse a long way. And we know that as we work with kids in preschool, as we work with the K through 12 students that we've been serving for years, and we continue to expand that. And even as we look at some continuing education areas, we think American Graduate can resonate to all of it. We're very committed to that, and we're doing a wonderful town hall coming up in the next couple of weeks where Melinda Gates, Pat Harrison, and others will be here. It will be on television, and it's going to involve lots of teachers from all over Southern California. It'll be all about the American Graduate Project. And we're focused on the American Graduate Project with something that we call our Community Champions effort. And what we're going to do now is take a break and take a look at one of our Community Champion spots.
I'm going to cut part of the way through this, but I'll...
You don't have to look far to find champions in all of our Southern California communities. In the case of Maynard Brown, they're as close as your local high school. A longtime faculty member at Crenshaw High School in Los Angeles, Maynard Brown has been the recipient of countless awards and recognitions throughout his teaching career. As an educator, Maynard strives to develop in his students the practical and relevant skills they will need to be successful in life.
I came here 20 years ago. When I got here, there was one course in business that was typing. And I found that to be egregious. And so it's been a 20-year journey for me in introducing entrepreneurship and financial literacy into a community that desperately needs it.
Maynard?
Just going to move ahead.
Any accountabilities that are external to the school, it's his own internal accountabilities that keeps him striving to make a difference for students.
And make a significant difference, he does. Just as his own life has been profoundly influenced by the young people he teaches.
The meaning and what I get from what I do on a daily basis provides a lot of joy. People often say, you have passion in what you do. It's the young people that I serve that allow me to develop that passion. And so every day that I walk away from here, I walk away with the sense that I've changed somebody's life. And that means everything to me.
Maynard Brown, PBS SoCal Community Champion. Community Champions is part of PBS SoCal's Local American Graduate Initiative. Let's make it happen.
One of the biggest challenges of our new reality is the fact that we are in the Los Angeles market. And as I've talked to producers, both for commercial and for non-commercial television, they hate the LA market because their stuff always does more poorly here. The market is so diverse. There are so many non-English speaking viewers who watch non-English speaking channels. There are also so many activities to do and so much outside participation in things, and not to mention all the other distractions and various platforms we have, that it's really hard to get everybody's attention. And even if you repeat something over and over, it's tough. And I'm continually surprised with everything we've tried to do at the number of people who've said, oh, what? Yeah, what happened? Something happened with PBS, and I don't know what it is. We've talked about it on the air. It's been in the paper time after time after time in the LA Times and many other papers. And others have talked about it on the radio. And still, it seems the habit market hasn't quite figured it out. All they know is they like that show they found on our station on such and such a night, and that's it. So
I'm going to let you, Jamie, you want to fill in about any activities that you have planned for community engagement?
Sure. In recognizing this shift and the fact that we're now PBS SoCal, and as everyone has mentioned, you want to reflect your diversity and your population. And so in doing that, a lot of what we've been involved with is forming community councils, affinity groups, if you will. So all of us in public broadcasting have our community advisory boards, and although that can be one nice eclectic mix, you really don't get that depth one-on-one interaction within the community, as you say, walking the streets, George. So we decided to really go out and meet the different communities and spend time there and build affinity groups that would then organize themselves into councils that could tell us what their issues are and what they wanted to see reflected on air and how would that look and what would that be like. So in the last year, we've gone out and there's approximately 9 different affinity groups that we are building and working with. And they don't belong to PBS SoCal. They are community councils to PBS SoCal. So it's their voice, their issues, their concerns. And one of the greatest things that came from it is, although they may not have been aware of the shift or the real change that took place, and now they know where to find our channels because we're on a different channel number depending on what cable service you receive or what satellite you may be involved in. And so it's very difficult in a 7-county area to know where to find your new PBS station. So we made sure we were educating people with little cheat sheets that would let them have that. And these affinity groups have been our boots on the ground activists, if you will. They go out and they talk within their churches, their schools, their community centers, and they're telling everyone where we are and how to find us and how to be highlighted. And one of the great things they even came up with themselves that we're incorporating in this next year is community tours. And the community tour we're going to be doing is we have a bus, and we're putting some of our staff on the bus, and some board members are on the bus, and we go to the highlighted centers that that community group has told us is important to go visit, like the Centro Latino Literacy Organization. So we'll all go there, and then one of their representatives gets on the bus, and after we've done the tour, they continue to talk about that organization as we go through LA traffic, which we all know is delightful, to the next location. And so you're getting an in-depth one-on-one question and answer with representatives from that community center or community group before we go to the next one. So you really end up having the walking tour, where you get to hear what's important and what's of value. And a lot of this has started out easily, as you said, on education and starting with the American Graduate Project. But there are so many more things that need to be highlighted. As you said, the entrepreneurial spirit of first-generation, non-national corporations. That's where we're seeing a lot of support coming to us, is because there are hubs within these communities that are known supporters through grocery stores or banking entities or other economic support systems that are in place. And once they know your family, once they know who you are, you'll get the $10, $25, $100, $500, and as they have more assets and discretionary dollars, they are going to want to support you, and we do see that coming in. So that's sort of some of the grassroots activities we're doing. We realize we have to have a business mind. We're going to be here next week, next month, next year, and decades to come, but you have to have that grassroots connection. You have to be who they want you to reflect and highlight in their community. Give them a voice that they don't feel they get anywhere else.
And Jamie doesn't say this, but with a staff of 46, doing that kind of face-to-face is very difficult. I mean, you know that small stations don't grow suddenly. We've only grown incrementally. What we're doing is an amazing use of limited resources. The amount of money that we're spending to get the impact that we are giving, I think, is a remarkable story that hasn't been told. And the collaboration that we're doing with the other 2 stations in this market is another story that hasn't been told. We're reaching out to KLCS, KVCR. We're engaged in a collaborative, cross-promotional, scheduling, and just general online presence. I mean, we have their broadcast schedules on our website. So when someone goes to the PBS SoCal website and they want to know what's on 8 o'clock tonight, they see KLCS and KVCR schedules right next to ours so that they know that they have choices. And that may be one of the reasons why, along with KCET, viewership for public media is growing in this market. We're creating a new set of rules about how stations in a market overlap each other. we want to make sure those two stations succeed. We really want them to succeed. We're going to do everything we can to help them along as the primary station. So that's a very different thing, but I think, you know, coming from where we were, we know how they feel, and we want, you know, we're getting rid of the 8-day delay. It's completely been done away with. These are those little things that help that station succeed.
Vinny, do you know of other markets where stations are doing this kind of thing? Cross-listing and...
Well, I think Los Angeles is the primary example, and I think it's the example where other markets are really looking to. We're about to put out guidelines that stations will be able to access on the television side in 2013 that makes a change in the way CSG funds are distributed, so that stations that are in these overlap markets, we call them, that develop robust, significant plans to collaborate rather than compete, will receive a significant increase in their community service grants if they do that.
How would you define collaborate?
We're looking for, we're framing it in terms of bandwidth. So if you have multiple stations in the market, that bandwidth is a community asset. So how can those stations come together to get the most effective use of that bandwidth? So that can include over-the-air programming, it can include multicast channels, it can include data casting. We're being very unprescriptive about this. Stations can be very creative about the way that they go about doing this. But where we're going to be, you know, because I'm a cynical guy, careful is this a real plan as opposed to smoke blowing? But stations that have a real plan and are serious about executing will be able to have significant resources. And I'll say, this is not something that you know, CBB can't drive these changes by ourselves. So this was a concept that was developed out of the last community service grant television review, which ended about a year ago. And so there we had about a dozen leadership stations that were saying, yeah, we need to change the way we do business, and moving CSG money is a big way to do that, and they completely signed up for this kind of initiative.
So ideally we'll be seeing lots of different experiments? Is that the idea?
Ideally we'll be seeing some different experiments that result in some different results. And I'll just mention in passing what I mentioned briefly at the last meeting is, you know, the couple of joint master control operations that we're funding also go right to the heart of the way stations are organized and their culture. And I think that's driven by the hard reality of no more PTFP funding and no more digital funding from CPB. So stations have to fund their depreciation now in ways that they haven't had to before. And looking at that cost of refreshing and replacing master control is a huge burden on stations. And what we're finding now is with the technology available and the way the fiber optics networks in the country are developing, the joint master control that will be in Syracuse can operate 100 stations. And in fact, KOCE was looking at being part of one of those. The cost of taking the content from KOCE, pushing it out to the joint master control site on the East Coast, and sending the transmitter signal back is immaterial compared to the operating cost of a joint master control facility. So it's pretty interesting to see that develop.
Other questions, comments? Well, again, I think this is an interesting example of the success stories around the table, but now I didn't realize we were sort of opening the door to other stations looking into collaborations that...
We're doing two things, Adam. So one significant opportunity in CSG program is this collaboration. The other significant opportunity is consolidation. So stations, if stations have come together and actually combined operations in either a long-term joint operating agreement or actual change of ownership, then that entity's community service grant will be significantly larger over the next period of time than stations that don't.
We're going to end with one of the projects that is coming out of the American Graduate Program. It is the first thing that we've discussed in all the stuff we've done that's primarily a web project. Okay, it's also different than almost everything we've discussed in that an independent producer is responsible for it, with support from Latino Public Broadcasting.
Yeah, so I think apropos of what Jamie and Ed were talking about in terms of deep new collaborative models, I've been primarily producing either at the station level at KQED or lately nationally for PBS National, mostly long-form docs. LPB, with whom I've worked a lot on many projects in the past, came to me and commissioned a project since they knew I was doing some work at USC Annenberg about best practices in collaborative production with youth. So we came up with a project that would work for American Graduate, and now we're deeply, deeply working together with PBS SoCal to present this web-based series. It'll be a multi-component web series about a radical small charter school in South LA that works with kids who've been incarcerated and gets them back into school. So the kind of overall frame for the series is about interrupting the school to jail track. We'll have multiple components, multiple partners. We're working with California Report, our statewide radio news magazine, on one story. We're working with one of KPCC's education reporters on some news-driven stories that will link into from our evergreen topics. And the project will be something that can be built upon over the next year. So potentially a long-form documentary will emerge from it, as well as a partnership with an organization in London. I've been funded to internationalize some of the content through some work with the British Council. So I think very quickly I'll just show a little teeny trailer about our production process. And then this will be coming out. We'll be basing the project on KOCE's website, working with their web team to get the full package out to the whole PBS system. That's the speakers, not the piece.
What scares me the most is getting killed. That's what scares me.
A lot of people don't like to be on camera, and so when they see a camera, they feel like intimidated and they don't want to be there or cooperate. And sometimes, you know, they're the most valuable people that you would want to have on camera because their personality and their attitude is so strong and they're so good on camera that they don't even know. So I encounter, you know, wanting to film people that I think are so interesting, but they don't like the camera in their face. Like, I don't like the camera.
What are the techniques that you use to make people feel more comfortable?
Well, I talk to them like my friends, and I tell them like, man, you know, this is what's gonna happen with this footage. Like, you know, you can help a lot of people that are going through the same things as you, that are gonna see it and are gonna feel much better. That maybe you guys are going through the same thing. That, you know, they're gonna see, well, hey, you know, this person went down this path, and we're similar, so maybe, you know, I should do what they're doing now, so I won't go down that road. And that gets to a lot of people. They kind of.
Hey, let's see the shirt.
Say cheese.
Thank you.
So we have our notebook for the releases. We have the charger. We have the actual computer. We have a little video camera. We have this camera that I'm being filmed on. I feel like documentation is very important. There is a process, but I mean, everybody with the right attention to filmmaking, they'll go wherever they can.
I don't know if I just blew the speakers on the system or something. rest assured that production values on this are very, very high. And that's one of the things that I wanted to make this sort of differentiate itself from other collaborative projects or projects where there's youth involvement, is that the production values are actually very high. We're working with a combination of small HD cameras, HD SLR, and the occasional participation of a very, very high-level cinematographer who gave us a great break on doing some shooting. So. And I think this could potentially be a model for engaging more civic participation in production, but I will say it's as difficult or more difficult to produce in this style than to just make it yourself in a typical top-down, as I see a lot of head signs. Yeah. But hopefully we'll find a deeper level of engagement with youth, which is of course what we're after with this project.
It's interesting that this is a web project which then moves to television.
Yeah.
I think we've been hearing a lot of different variations on that from KPCC, from KCET, from everyone around the table. There's something new here which is enabled by technology, both in terms of distribution online and in terms of the cheaper production tools that would have taken $90,000 worth of post-production equipment 20 years ago.
Absolutely, and also I think trends in independent long-form documentary filmmaking, which is over the last few years, it's become very obvious to us as long-form filmmakers that we need to have really robust engagement campaigns. We need to repurpose our media so that you don't always feel like you're watching something that's way too long. Break things up into modules, do really deep on the ground. You just saw the NEA funding. A lot of it's going to interactive projects and digital projects. The idea for this was actually to even reverse that more. Start off by making short modules. Start off by doing community engagement. Start off by building the partnerships with the NGO sector, with KOCE, with other players in the system, and then see have we built enough critical mass to support audience and engagement efforts for a long-form film.
We're going to have to wind down, but I want to continue discussion of this just for a few more seconds in this way. Ken, I know you're thinking, you thought about this kind of material, how to reach younger audiences, more diverse audiences. What's your reaction to what you saw, what you just heard from Jennifer, what you're thinking on this?
Well, I mean, I love this stuff. My background's in media, so I think it's about figuring out how to adequately package it with other content so that you can still fill a traditional block on the broadcast. And then be really consistent about how that pipeline of content gets fed week after week. But I like the idea of web.
You haven't spoken much today, but what are your thoughts?
Bayback is working with KQED on some content for their American Graduates project. We've got our youth producers doing both video and audio for that. And I was just curious to know actually what a little bit more about a little bit more about the plan for the web. What's
She just flew back from London and she's still recovering.
So we actually are talking about a couple of different models for how to roll these out. We've been talking with the KOC web folks about maybe not doing, we're going to have 15 episodes at least, not stretching the release of those out over 15 weeks, but doing a block of time where we do one per day or one every other day to see if we can build more momentum in terms of the way that the content's built for this first chunk of content. So Facebook obviously becomes key, link exchanges with KPCC and so report and other entities.
Vinny, what kind of theory or whatever we're going to call it, what model has emerged at the national level to try to bring stuff like this together with Downton Abbey, whatever you want to call it, How do these two pieces actually work together at some point?
Well, I don't know that we know. I think there are people doing a lot of different experimenting and trying a lot of different things.
But the thing that's the crucial thing to it is to allow a format that can slide into the broadcast scheduling and so forth. And at least it's going to have to be a half an hour. However many pieces are in the 27.
Yeah. Harry.
It's interesting that this is, I guess it's Kismet. Must be the London Panama thing.
Okay.
No, talking about what might be an interesting bridge. I just did a project. I was telling Adam, my good friend who invited me today, that we worked with Fairfax High School on a project which we're calling H4, and it's the first time that professional cinematographers, actors, have worked with high school students. I think, at this level, and we've got a full-length feature of Shakespeare for the first time set in the American perspective. It's actually a black perspective of Henry IV parts 1 and 2. And it will probably be about 2.5 hours. But it's an interesting thing. We've got some of the kids in the movie. They actually ran camera. They learned how to. Right now, Fairfax High School is working with an organization called Greenway Arts Alliance, and they've got equipment that's being donated by CBS and other places. They're going to actually convert part of a floor of a high school to a production facility. So I would love to, talk more to you about this, because we've got a long form, even though it's not a documentary per se. It is also, it's shot all on new media, so it's all digital stuff. So it might be the hybridization.
Well, we've heard a number of models here. Bill, please step in.
Well, actually, I think one of the challenges that Vinny and CPB have in terms of public policy is, with all due respect, I'm not sure that the model going forward for what we just saw really is fitting into a broadcast schedule. I think, to me, what is interesting is, could that content be aggregatable at sufficient scale where people, through micropayments or other kinds of non-traditional support, could sustain that effort? And how you invest in that?
Are you really saying yes, or just nodding your head here?
No, I am. I mean, I brought it up at the IMA. I said, why not a National Progressive Hip Hop Service? And someone raised their hand and said, well, how would we fit that in the current schedule? I said, hip hop exists. It's bigger than PBS and NPR together. It gets its own space.
What's your
you don't give it half an hour and see how it looks.
Just stop thinking about sending your thing through the existing channels.
No, I think, with this conversation reminded me, I picked up on something that some people said about where public television began. And it was supposed to be a way for people to have access to and to reflect the communities the stations were in. Somewhere along the way, and there are good reasons for it. National programming makes money, and so stations concentrate on that. But I think what I'm hearing that's very encouraging is that reflecting communities, talking to communities, engaging communities is not only the right thing to do, but it can be good business. And there's no reason why we shouldn't embrace this. And I think it is a real challenge, is how do the superstructures that oversee public television assist that process? I don't know how CPB assists that process, or how PBS plays it. I don't know the answer to those questions. But it seems to me that I'm hearing over and over again, there are people exploring ways to reach out to their communities, and they're having success. So somehow or another, the system has got to figure out a way to support that.
Al, you're an entrepreneur. You look at a thing like this. Can you imagine this fitting in the system, or do we need to work around the system and have other vehicles?
Well, I don't know that I'm the best one to comment on that, but I think any system should be looked at with the idea that it should be continuously changing. I mean, the point you make, Ken, is so obvious. The issue is not whether what's being done in the hip-hop community fits into what we're doing. It's if you want to build a system and you want to have more growth in it, you better grab it and own it. In other words, that's the point. I mean, it's going to happen whether the system accommodates it or not. So the question is, how do you open the system up so that it can get inputs from different people? Because, I mean, it hasn't been mentioned, at least not when I've been in the room, but I thought the CPB numbers that were released in the current article on January 30th that showed that 2 out of every 3 public television stations are operating the red, and the comparison of that with radio, which is doing so much better, that, from a television perspective, that's a real cold shower. Pay attention. I mean, what is anybody being smug about? I mean, and then so my feeling about it is, I don't know enough about the radio component of it, but it certainly appears that radio is being more successful at finding new ways than television at this point. So just as a guest in here, I would just say that open the system up and figure out how to get 8 or 9 doors so that the disenfranchised can become clearly part of it. That's the only way to grow it.
They're their own.
You have something to say?
Well, yeah, I think we've had
You're
this.
next to Ed.
We've had this conversation on the phone. I think just a number of points. I mean, one is yes, that's the reality, right? As I said to my radio colleagues, don't sit there being so smug. A lot of the success comes from things that you had no control over, like commercial radio deciding to leave the news business. There's also a significant part of that success that comes from the increase in physical number of frequencies. So stations, there are more public radio stations on the air now than there were 10 years ago. Los Angeles is a good example that are providing more diverse kinds of services. There aren't more, thank God, television services by and large on the air right now. I would say, so in all of this conversation, I think it's a couple other points. It's easy. First of all, it's easy to miss the point that the golden age of network television, you guys know better than I, was the 80s. And as you got past the 80s into the 90s, very slowly things began to change. And it takes 10 years for people to figure that out and to begin to how to react. Public television was a network service, and it's in the process now of reinventing itself for the future, and not throughout the system. As usual, 20% of the stations are leading, generating 80% of the results. Yeah. I think that's the place to focus. We've had some of those examples here, and there is some really terrific work being done. Don't lose sight of that fact in kind of the moaning and groaning around the nationwide statistics, which we have been talking to public television stations about for at least 5 years. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I would say we are investing in other alternative kinds of channels, like, for instance, the World Channel, which has the ability to do things outside of the kind of half-hour normal things. That's totally an experiment. Who knows if it's going to be successful or not? We don't know. And I think there are other kinds of experimentation around that's happening as well. But I would say, going back to the first point, is that there is a tradition, there is a 40-year history that's associated with public media, public television, public radio. And for all of the talk about public television being outmoded, inflexible, there are plenty of stories and plenty of examples to show actually in places, even at PBS, when you look at the powerful results of the kids' online products and the number of videos that they're serving up, I think that's absolutely true. With some of the PBS children's content, there are kids who don't have a prayer of getting into any kind of a preschool program that are showing up in kindergarten and first grade on a par with their more affluent peers because they've had access to PBS Kids program both on air and online. We shouldn't pull the blinders down. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of change that needs to happen, but we have a system that's generating many positive benefits in many places, and it's really important as we work with the system to change that we recognize where those positive impacts are and that we work to maintain those while we figure out what the model is going forward. The last thing I'll say is, and thanks for letting me go on so long, we're in the process now, because we were assigned by Congress of doing a study of alternatives to federal funding. We were assigned that task by the Appropriations Committee. It's a long, complex story. I won't go into great detail, except to say we have Booz and Company been working with us crunching the numbers. When you look at digital, to say digital is bleak in terms of any kind of revenue generation capacity is like the ultimate optimist statement. So Booz's attitude about that, and they have deep experience working with all kinds of commercial providers, is unless you're in search, the market for digital, any kind of revenue associated with digital properties is like worse than zero. So as we talk about kind of web first and all those other kinds, we have to recognize we got to figure out a model that's probably going to be based in more the traditional public media services that is able to pay for those digital products, which are essential to offer. I'm not saying don't offer them. But what I am saying is they're not going to pay their own way. To say that for the foreseeable future, probably not for our kids' foreseeable future, the way this thing is developing. So it's just the reality of the situation.
You've done a great summation. I'll just add that I was over visiting folks at the BBC a while ago in the BBC digital area, and they have exactly the same view, which is BBC.co.uk will never support itself.
Yeah.
And so it'll be, because of the public broadcaster, BBC supporting it is what it's going to be. And so they said, so we think that BBC.co.uk is a public broadcaster.
Let me get Ed, and then I'm going to get Bill, and we're going to get some closing comments.
Well, I can't say it as well as Danny can, but broadcasters should look at some intermediary way of getting the hip-hop program to be almost near Masterpiece Theater. We're using our digital multicast. You're right, it's probably not going to pay for itself for a while, but it doesn't cost a whole lot to have 1.5 FTEs to program a channel that is uniquely driven to accepting independent filmmaker content. We're looking at that as a way to try to get the people whose voices aren't being heard, who can't necessarily be right next to Masterpiece Theater because of common carriage and other things that those of us who have to live in the world of, X number of hours of children's programming, X number of hours of common carriage programming. We're expanding that. We looked at our assets and we said, okay, we've got a bright, under 30 woman who understands the world of independent filmmaking. She's looking at it from a different perspective with the old eyes of someone looking over her shoulder like me. I'm talking to her about rights, about programming strategies. And with a little bit of seed money from CPB, we were able to get a channel going that is now knocking on doors and saying, give us your content. And I know this is also being talked about elsewhere. So it's that in-between step between online and digital and broadcasting. It's neither analog nor digital. It's somewhere in between.
Bill?
The chairman of my board of trustees, a guy named Gordy Crawford, who just happens to be profiled in the KCET article. I'm not sure how you did that. No, I'm joking. He's the chief media analyst for the Capital Group and has been generally considered to be the best business analyst of media, not only in the nation but in the world. And one of the things that he's fond of saying is, at least so far, no legacy medium or no legacy media has made the transition successfully from legacy to this multi-platform digital environment. The closest we've had was AOL Time Warner merger, where you had the wrong technology at the wrong price at the wrong time, right? It was pretty much a triple disaster. But, and this is not to give ourselves a pass, but, every single legacy media company in the world is struggling with this, and nobody has a positive return on their investment yet. A couple, we'll see whether The Guardian can get there. There are a couple of others who are, who might be, but no one yet has a positive net return on digital investment anywhere in the world. It is, which is both fascinating and frightening at the same time.
Adam, you want to pull a few closing comments together and highlight a few?
I just wanted to say that at the beginning of this session, I relayed Jeff Cowan's observation from a couple of days ago that we would have a lot of success stories around the table. Everybody around the table had a success story of one kind or another. We've heard some cautionary tales also of not being too smug. But I think this really has been, again, to use Jeff Cowan's phrase, a man bites dog session at a time when there's so much about gloom and doom and bad numbers, that there are examples of leadership in programming, leadership in broadcasting, leadership in public service media, which are really making a difference. And we've heard a lot of that today. We'll be continuing. I put up the current website because there'll be much more about this. Karen is frantically typing away back there. There'll be a great deal of coverage on current, and the entire webcast today will be indexed and cached sometime next week. I don't know what the timetable is, but it'll be up and available through the website, through the Annenberg website, and we'll put in cross links back and forth to current, so that you can actually see. I don't know if you can put in, Al Jerome and just see Al's comments, but you could be able to put in Los Angeles market and just see from 12 noon on, or Nashville and just see the first part. And I thank everyone for coming. Thank you to Brenda for hosting us here on, I know it was very short notice. And thanks to everyone around the table and everyone standing and seated in the room.
Let me add that when I first took on this role with Adam to put this together, I thought it was preposterous. I thought it was pretentious and ridiculous to have something that would attempt to address the enormity of public media in a constructive way. I've been to too many meetings that, as Steve Barron said, you know, another discussion that didn't go anywhere. We have taken a great deal of effort to try to put together groups of people with topics and formats that can lead to a continuing discussion. And the couple of things that I think we should pick up from today, one we observed as we were going around, the process of change is a decade-long process. Even a 2-year discussion is nowhere adequate to take care of the depth of the issues that we're talking about. The second thing is that I think the potential loss of federal funding caused a great chill in the public broadcasting industry. Everyone was very focused on it, and we sort of grew out of that. What you hear around the table more and more is people are beginning to think past that. Where are we even if that happens? Where are we even under some very bad case scenarios? And I keep coming back to myself as I go through this is you still have a lot of very powerful broadcast properties. And I've used as inspiration something that Feather Houston said early on when we began this discussion, which is as the social service agencies began to face the loss of money with the end of welfare as we know it, the places that did well stopped talking about individual organizational survival and focused on the service. Who were we trying to serve? How were we trying to serve them? What were we doing here in the first place? We built buildings, we hired staff, we equipped offices, but all of that was in another purpose. It was to do something for them. And I think we have plenty of stuff to do something for them. How do we coordinate it? How do we tune it up? I think there's an underlying business model that will survive this. And I think it will slowly emerge. It's going to be of the form that we know. We have not seen new things in the picture. What we saw, and I want to stress this, what we've seen is if you look at the better places, in a sense, there's been a change in their mix. Their mix has moved towards major gifts. And that has given them the firepower they need to make some big things. So I hope you'll stick with us and be a participant in this discussion as it continues on. It's been a great pleasure to be here.
If I could just very quickly reiterate thanks all for being here, for the robust participation. This has been a terrific conversation. And I would just quickly note, one thing I did not sense present in the room today, fear. It's a bunch of trailblazers in this room, good independent thinkers, and in truth, the publicasting niche couldn't ask for better leadership. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you all.
I'm heading to San Miguel de Allende, Mexico.